Made comparisons between Zionists and Nazis. And that, by the way, is something that I just want to insert this, that I'm making a documentary right now about Holocaust survivors, and Brad is working on it with me. It's about Holocaust survivors who are speaking out against the genocide in Gaza. And these people are, many of them, there's a not everyone does, but many of them say, of course, there are parallels between what the Nazis did and what the Zionists did. And one of our subjects says that they learned stuff, like the Zionists learned things from Nazis, including, humiliation. So I wanted to ask you to elaborate on these comparisons.
Let me be Katie, about this one. I don't mind being personal. So I grew up in Lebanon as a Muslim Arab who became, revolutionized at an early age, drawn into Marxism and revolutionary ideologies with the Palestinian movement and so on. I was always against a two-state solution, for the liberation of Palestine, establishment of a state in the land of Palestine where everybody lives equally and so on. But this, maybe because of my radicalism or the way I viewed it, I was always sensitive to the Jewish question very early on. Even though I grew up in Beirut, where most of the Jews were left Lebanon already, they were like 5 or 6, and I would ask about where they are, and I would go and even though I have no power, and I would check on them, see if anybody's bothering them and so on. And I also educated myself about the Holocaust, and I used to sternly warn Arabs against any Nazi analogies or against any Holocaust analogy. I was very firm about it. I wrote in Arabic about it. I gave speeches, interviews about it. I never accepted it because I read enough about the Holocaust, and I believe there should be a special solemnity and respect for the victim of the Holocaust, for the uniqueness of the horrors inflicted on the Jewish people at the time. And I have not deviated from that respect. But now, since October 7, I argue that out of my deep respect for the victims of the Holocaust and the crimes inflicted by Nazi Germany, if we see any resemblance in current times, we need to speak out against it. And it is in that spirit that I now say it is not politically or PR convenient that we invoke the Nazi or Holocaust analogy in regard to the State of Israel, but it is morally the right thing to do because there are clear analogies. I mean, when you have officials of Israel giving material for the petition by South Africa, in which they say we want to deprive them of food, of water, of electricity. I mean, they make their intention of genocide very clear. In that sense, we will say, this is very much like Nazi Germany. If anything, I mean, Nazi Germany, they used to be less explicit. They would speak behind closed door. The Nazis of Israel today, they were very open about it. They are totally explicit. Why do they do that? Because they know since the Zionist movement, the racism of the Zionist movement always appealed to the West. From the first time of Theodor Herzl, when he spoke about creating of a Jewish state in which there will be civilization as opposed to barbarism of the Arabs, when he invoked a proverb in French, qui veut la fin veut le moyen, to justify the slaughter of civilians, when they started like that, we realized that this is a movement that made as its intention the denigration, the subjugation, and the slaughter of a large number of the native population to make it feasible for Arabs, for the Israelis to establish their own state. But they early on knew that the racism of the movement, and it called itself colonial early on, because it was a colonial movement that was born in Europe in the late 19th century. And they said the aim of the Zionist movement in the first declaration of 1897 in Basel, Switzerland, that the aim is to colonize the land of Palestine. It wasn't a dirty word. And they spoke to the racism of the West, and the West has always identified with Israel because of their very contempt for the Arab and the Muslim population. And they didn't know and they didn't care about the Christian native population. And of course, they didn't do that because of the love of the Jewish population. They didn't. But in the balance, I mean, just like Nazi Germany, the West has a hierarchy of races and ethnicities that they hate. So they hate Arabs and Muslims more than they hate Jewish people. And there is still anti-Semitism among Westerners. Some of the top Western officials who supported Israel were anti-Semite, from Harry Truman
Balfour.
to Richard Nixon, Lord Balfour. I mean, the list is too long to list right now.
What are some of the things that make you think of the Nazis? Like any particular policies or discourse?
The industrial
Okay.
level of murder. Israel is really trying to kill the largest number of people possible. Two, the use of technology to achieve large number of murder of people. I mean, when you throw 80 bombs in one night, destroy 6 residential buildings, there is no explanation of that except to kill a large number of people. And every few days, they would destroy another residential building. And they did that nonstop over the last year and 2 months since October 8th when they started their war. And they were planning on doing that. I mean, look what they're doing in Gaza to make life unlivable, to
Okay.
want to push out of the land a large number of people and kill as many of them, to use terror on a mass level. This is all intentional genocide.
Starve. Yeah.
I mean, to starve and to declare your intention that you want to starve them, and to
Right.
have total disregard for their lives, and most importantly, to use the rhetoric of denigration of the population, comparing them to animals. That's
Human
what the
animals.
Nazis
Yeah.
did. I
Right.
mean, read the rhetoric of the magazine that Goebbels edited. It is just like what I read in Israeli newspapers by Israeli officials. I don't
Yeah.
care if they are labor, if they are left, center.
Right.
There is no differences. If anything that was revealing for many in the world who care about human life is that there are no left, center, or right in Israel. They're all the same when it comes to disregard of Palestinian lives. I haven't heard of one Israeli fighter pilot who basically refused orders to kill civilians. They are killing civilians on a daily basis and brag about it. They are
Yeah.
bragging about what they do. It is a society that is rotten to the core because it is racist to the core. It is Nazi-like to the core. They have no respect for their lives. They
So
want to
keep going.
establish their political goal. And I think they are doing a large number of killing as a message. They wanted to kill so many tens of thousands of Palestinians after October 7th to scare the population, to deter people in the future from doing anything in terms of armed resistance against Israeli occupation.
And I think that some people will say, "Oh no, but they don't have the gas chambers," as if that is the only problematic part of the Holocaust. I mean, was it not bad enough that they ghettoized people, that they rounded them up, that they
Yeah.
shot people, that they starved people? Um, it is really, it is so disturbing and disgusting to see people not make the connections between the Holocaust and what's happening today. It always makes me think, like, so you probably would have been a Nazi if you hadn't been Jewish. Like, why not? Like, your ethics and morals don't bring you to empathize with the people who are being subjugated and exterminated. So you probably, had you had the luck of being an Aryan, maybe you would have been a Nazi too, because you don't seem to see anything wrong with this.
And it is not a coincidence that the neo Nazis of Western Europe and the neo fascists and the far right groups all identify with Israel because they spring from the same ideology. I mean, Nazi ideology, if people paid attention to it early on, it has all the blueprint for a future of Nazi like crimes against the Arab population. They have been murdering school children all throughout the life when I was a kid, killing children and not worrying about it. This is their history.
Yeah, and playing there was, playing the sounds of babies crying to bring people out so that they can shoot them. I mean,
Right.
this is like totally perverse.
Perverted. And
Yeah.
also the mix. And by the way, there's another analogy with Nazi Germany, the mixture of sexualizing
Yeah.
the racist murder of the civilians. I mean, this is very much Nazi like. Look how much there is sexual imagery and sexual torture and Israeli soldiers in sexual positions as they murder the native population. That all come from that memory of Nazi Germany.
If you say this, the most despicable thing is, if you say this, you're the anti-Semite. It's more problematic for these people to make that comparison than it is for the people to be doing the things that are actually comparable.
For me, even though I'm an Arab, I never am intimidated by these false,
Yeah.
bogus, politicized charges of
Sure.
anti-Semitism. There are real anti-Semites in this world, of course, and
Yeah.
I think I've always called for the rejection from our movement, and I always speak out against them. But on the other hand, we know that Israel and Zionism use the charge of anti-Semitism to intimidate criticism of Israel, and that, to me, is a great service to anti-Semitism because it empties the term from its true meaning. I mean, and when Israel uses that charge, I say to myself, I don't take lessons about the horrors of anti-Semitism from Zionists necessarily,
Right.
because they are more willing to join alliances with anti-Semites. I would
Right.
never join alliance with anti-Semites. I
Right.
reject anti-Semites when they creep into our movement, but the
Right.
Zionists have no qualms about it.
Right.
I mean, look
Yeah.
at Elon Musk. Elon Musk made it very clear he is an anti-Semite. There was no question about it. He travels to Israel, and now he is endorsed and praised. ADL does not worry about this powerful
Yeah.
man who is anti-Semitic, revealing
Right.
himself publicly
Right.
because he supports Israel. Any anti-Semites can be forgiven if they support Israel. Anwar Sadat, the one who is fondly remembered by Zionists, was an unabashed Nazi anti-Semite.
Wow.
It
No,
didn't
no, no.
bother them.
Yeah.
Mahmoud Abbas, the United States want to put that lousy man, corrupt, unelected man, in charge of Gaza as a collaborationist surrogate leader for on behalf of Israeli occupation. That man wrote a PhD dissertation, a lousy one, in Moscow, in which he denied the Holocaust. These are anti-Semites.
Right.
Arab anti-Semites always find refuge in the Zionist movement.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, you said that it's dangerous, and I think there is already blowback. And I don't want to like we're going to talk more about Palestine and Syria. I don't want to like privilege or act like the priority here are Jewish feelings or safety. But I have to say, there's that guy like Jake Shields, I think is his name. I think he's an MMA guy, and he interviewed David Duke, and not in a confrontational way. And so I commented on this on Twitter. I was like, "Oh, silly me, thinking that Jake Shields is an anti-Semite." And people are like, "Well, maybe you should listen to what David Duke has to say. He's actually not an anti-Semite. He's just an anti-Zionist." And so now you have people infiltrating the pro-Palestine movement. Some, I think, people. The reason I even comment on this is because I think there are people out there who are so used to Israel hiding behind the anti-Semitism claim that it has become, like you said, empty of meaning, which means that it's harder to point out when there really is anti-Semitism. And now I have to explain to people that David Duke is an anti-Semite.
Exactly. And David Duke appeared on Al Jazeera more than 15 years ago. And I spoke out against it because somebody like that should never be allowed into our camp. And we should reject people like that. And I have seen during this war, Katie, some accounts with names like Tom and Adam and so on that have no real name behind them, in which they vomit anti Semitic vile rhetoric. And those should never be made as allies, and we should never retweet them or engage with them.
Yeah.
I mean, I view us in the pro-Palestine camp as protector of real justice, and as a result, we are the one who fight real anti-Semitism, unlike the Zionists who play games with that fight.
And create it. I mean, there's no way you're not going to create more anti-Semitism when you're literally live streaming a genocide and saying that you're doing it in the name of Jews.
Right. I mean, Israel has been a contributor to the rise of anti-Semitism, no doubt about it. And some of the early Zionists even warned about that, and they had that concern. Yeah.